I thank the gentleman for his fine speech too, and the last speech of the competition as a whole, and of this debate I call upon the opposition whip.
Thank you very much, Russell. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here tonight, addressing all the Tel Aviv supporters and, both of ours. In summarising this debate today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to look at three areas. I'm going to look, first of all, at this issue of whether or not states have a duty to people who aren't their citizens. I'm going to explain to you why it is that we don't think they do. I'm going to talk, secondly, about homogeneity and diversity. Why it is that we think total, unrestrained, uncontrollable diversity within a society does not make for a happier or better society. And I'm going to talk thirdly and finally, ladies and gentlemen, about the impact this has on states. Why we think this screws any ability of any state anywhere ever to try and look after its population in an effective or efficient way. So let's crack on, ladies and gentlemen. Let's start, and let's talk about whether or not states have this duty to other people who weren't born within their borders. Because this has been what the proposition was just repeated again and again and again. Ladies and gentlemen, we just do not think it is the case that states have precisely the same moral duty to every person in the world. Now, thank you. We point out, the fact that that means that, for example, any state that does not spend almost all, 100% of its GDP on aid until every person in the world has the same income, thank you, is a moral monster of a state. We think the fact that, that seems a slightly odd consequence suggests that something has gone wrong. Let's look at where it's gone wrong, ladies and gentlemen. Is what is not done, ladies and gentlemen, is managed to distinguish between political borders and geographic borders, as Max told you. No, thank you. Because the fact is, ladies and gentlemen, that Joe stands up here and tells you that they're artificial social constructs. The fact that they are a social construct is precisely what makes them effective, ladies and gentlemen. It's precisely the fact that a war was waged, presumably by some people who thought they had some sort of common interest, that they were in some sense like one another, and they fought a war, and they determined that border so that they could be ruled by people like themselves. And that's what Max told you, ladies and gentlemen. And proposition did not respond to. That people do, thank you, have a right to be looked after, a right to have their interests protected. Thank you. I have a right to wear a skirt if I want to, ladies and gentlemen. And I have a right to have a government who doesn't think that's a bit weird. Ladies and gentlemen, that's why we recognise secessionist movements. And it's very well for Tom to say, well, it would be great if people can go, where they can self-identify best. The fact is it would be much harder for people to self-identify, ladies and gentlemen. Because you are not going to get government by people like you, because you lose any capacity, ladies and gentlemen, to have any say in who takes part in your democracy, in who it is who dictates the laws over you, ladies and gentlemen. It's not enough for them to stand up and go, well, we allow, ladies and gentlemen, immigrants to decide whether or not they sign the social contract. That's all very well, no thank you. But what you do is force governments to sign it. You force governments to sign the contract with anyone who wishes to, and in that process, you force every citizen of that country to sign that social contract with these people to whom they have no thank you, common interests and no common cultural boundaries. And I think that, ladies and gentlemen, is the reason why the social contract is not a contract that has to be signed with everybody. That is why states, thank you, have a special duty to their own citizens and not to other citizens of the world. So let's talk secondly, ladies and gentlemen, about homogeneity and diversity. If we were told on proposition, well, it'll be great, you'll get cultural diversity, you'll get fantastic food. We'd suggest, ladies and gentlemen, that recipes can probably cross borders. But moreover, we think that a lot of the benefits that they try to talk about can arise through things like trade, as Matt suggested. We think actually this leads to really damaging consequences for people within a society. We think it is an unfortunate psychological fact of humanity, one that it can be demonstrated, that people empathise less with people with whom they do not identify. That people are less likely to feel sympathetic towards the worse off in their society if they do not feel a common cultural bound with those people. We think that by introducing this, ladies and gentlemen, you lead to some really bad consequences. You get the kind of fracturing and splintering of your democratic constituencies along ethnic and religious and cultural lines, rather than along economic lines. Why is that bad? It means those constituencies are much less fluid, much less likely to work with one another. People are much less likely to change their party loyalties, for example. Go on, Joe.
Given that it's the sharing of social values and social consensus that creates a nation, not voluntary association, which doesn't just happen in this case, surely you believe then that the only alternative that you must believe if you believe you love the idea of contract is statelessness?
What? No. We think people should share their values and they should express that that value through a state, in order that the state can look after their interests. I'll tell you why, no thank you, your policy in fact will very much resemble statelessness when we get on to the third area of the summary, so just hold tight. So, ladies and gentlemen, we think that actually this is going to be really bad. It's going to lead not only to the fracture of democracy along these kinds of lines, but it's going to lead to much more racial and ethnic tension. Because we think when you overwhelm a society with vast numbers of new immigrant populations, people do tend to react like racists, ladies and gentlemen. That is again unfortunate, but it is something that you see again and again and again. It's not enough for proposition to stand up here and go, well, obviously they should police it. Like, unless they can give us a convincing account, no thank you, of how it is you handle lots of large ethnic groups who all hate one another, we don't think that they can just claim that there's some fantastic way of policing that, some fantastic way of looking out for them. We think, in fact, ladies and gentlemen, you're much more likely to get extremist, radical policies from governments. Which means you are more likely, no thank you, to stir up radical nationalist discontent, both in the countries that are receiving large immigrant populations, and in the countries, as Johnny talked about, that are sending away large parts of their population, thereby strengthening national spirit. No thank you. So let's talk thirdly and finally about what impact this has upon states. Within the fact that the proposition have chosen to refrain from discussing what states will do under this policy indicates that this is something they're quite worried